Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. Mosquitoes will be buzzing around us soon, unfortunately. Termites, they're busy year-round, but they really like the warm temperatures. You see them out fluttering around. Toss in the general bees' nests and spider webs, and there are plenty of reasons for you to call Southeast Termite and Pest Control this week. Trust your home to them this spring. I trust my home to them and have for years. The Haynes family does a tremendous job for more than 450 years now. It's their 50th anniversary. They've been East Tennessee's best locally owned, family-owned pest control business. See why I love them. Get to southeasttermite.com or call them this week. All right, let's take a look at the red flag ratings. And there you have it, folks. That is this year's list of potential first and second round foes for Tennessee. I assumed that Tennessee, and first of all, had to have this into the printer on Thursday so I could get it on Friday, which means there were teams on Thursday that were still alive for possibly getting in. And we looked at all the possibilities. Some of those teams on that board no longer exist in the running. Other teams that you see written in there have played their way onto the bubble or into the field. So they're now there. At the top, you've got the 4, 5, 6, and 7 seeds. Well, I'm sorry. Let me make that clearer. 13, 12, 11, and 10 are who plays 4, 5, 6, and 7. So there are 13, 12, 11, and 10 possibilities up there in those red boxes, the top line. Then you get down there in the darker red boxes, most likely second-round foes, if Tennessee is suited 4 through 7. That's where you get into the who you would face second round. That's 2 different numbers. So it gets wider and wider, and that's why you got about 80 teams up there. On the left are the lower numbers. Those are teams who statistically are most like the teams that Tennessee beat this year. Marshall, okay, well, they're not going to be in it, but St. John's, I think, is on the bubble still. Colgate could get in. 2s and 3s out of 8, okay, they could, you never know if you come out cold. If you don't have John Fulkerson, you can lose to anybody. But those are teams that typically didn't play the type of basketball that gave Tennessee trouble this year. On the other side, though, look at VCU, UConn, Duke, if they got in, Boise State. 6 out of 8. Those are teams that would, on paper, give Tennessee a bit of a hard time. Now, the interesting thing there is you see that bottom level, Colorado, and you're saying, wait a second, 6 out of 8? Tennessee beat Colorado. Yeah, in the season opener 5 months ago. Colorado had a really good end of the season, and if you played them today, it might not be the same result. Kansas, on the other hand, down there, and if you saw them in the second round, they're 3, and you beat them a couple of months ago. Even though they've played well down the stretch, statistically speaking, DNA-wise, style-wise, that's a team you could play and play with well. Now, does this mean that you look up there and you see North Carolina as a 4 and Abilene Christian as a 6? So you'd rather see Abilene Christian? Yeah, you still would, even though they're a 6, because they don't have the horses. Style-wise, could give you trouble, but look at it in this sense. Abilene Christian would be tougher than a North Texas, which would be tougher than Liberty. But you still don't want to play North Carolina versus Abilene Christian, okay? Anyway, there's the gist. I'm going to leave that up there so some of you, I know that some of you write this down, some of you photograph it, some of you, I get the email. So I'll leave it up there for a second. Jerron, I'm going to ask you, though. And you've been through this. As a GA at Missouri, as a player at Tennessee, what is Selection Sunday like for a guy who's sitting there? For us, it's fun. For you guys, it's got to be, especially if you don't know you're in. What's it like on Selection Sunday?
Well, I really I would say it depends mainly on your vantage point. Obviously, I done been in all type of seats. I done been in the confidence seat, knowing that we're going to get in. Granted, we almost didn't. We still had to do the play-in. I done been in other seats where I'm anxious. I done been in other seats where I'm, a little bit more nervous than what I should be, but we're hopeful. That type of deal. My junior year, we kind of didn't get in. We got #1 seed in the NIT, which was really good, but we thought we were going to get into the NCAA tournament, and we didn't. So that kind of was a letdown for us. And so I think it depends on your vantage point, but when you do go through Selection Sunday, it's still a blessing to go through it with your teammates. And then once you get in, you have that emotion together, and it brings you together. Even when you don't get in, it doesn't break you. It kind of still galvanizes you in some shape, form, or fashion that makes you want to play for each other.
Jimmy, we take a look at that board over there, and if you go back to Joe Lunardi's picks, he had Tennessee versus Winthrop. That's a 4 on the system, so not a terrible matchup for Tennessee in terms of style. They would play Purdue or Ohio in the second round. Purdue's a 5. not a great matchup. Ohio is a 2. You'd pray for that upset, obviously, on paper and just in reality. You'd want to play Ohio over Purdue. Jerry Palm has Georgetown as a 2, and normally you'd look at that name and just say, I don't know if I want to play Georgetown. That's a 2 in that system. And as we've shown over the last 15 years when Tennessee's gotten in, these numbers seem to work. So Georgetown would be a good matchup. If Jerry Palm's right, Tennessee fans should go, okay, I like my chances in that.
Georgetown's got some momentum. If I were Tennessee, I would probably hire the security people from Madison Square Garden, and maybe Patrick Ewing couldn't make it to the game.
Yeah.
But one thing I do get concerned a little bit about, and I think this can go both ways, a team that wins its tournament to play in it, like Connecticut did a few years ago with Kimball Walker, can be dangerous. The flip side is maybe they've exhausted their energy.
Yeah.
And so they are not quite as fresh, and so they don't have anything left in the tank. You don't know.
No, and it's also always interesting because you'll see teams that come in that are on a roll and hot, and other teams, there'll always be one team that just comes in and they've lost 5 of the last 7 games. It seems like Syracuse had one of those teams a couple of years ago that made the Final Four, even though they'd had a terrible finish down the end. People said, what are you doing getting them in the tournament? And they make a long run. It's very hard to predict this thing. I think what's interesting is you take a year where not everybody's played the same amount of games, but everybody's played fewer than usual, and then you throw COVID into it. We were talking about this off air here. You've seen it with teams in the conference tournaments who've bugged out. In the NCAA, the powers that be have said as long as you've got 5 guys who don't test positive, you can still play. So it'd almost be like an AAU thing or pickup ball. But boy, this is going to make for a really, really weird tournament if you've got this team gets through and they don't have to play anybody because somebody else had to get bounced due to COVID.
I think it's going to come down to a lot of the coaches' willingness to kind of adjust to what's happening, not what they thought was going to happen, if that makes sense. Because sometimes you'll have a game plan and then you get to the game and it goes totally left than what you thought it was going to go. But some coaches, we're going to stick to our guns. You got to adjust, man. You got to adjust. And I think what I found was sometimes coaches who have more experience are less likely to adjust than coaches who are new and willing to take that new leap of faith, because the terms are different, and if the terms are different, you have to adjust with the terms rather than you trying to dictate the terms, if that makes sense.
Well, the more depth you have, the better.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that would, especially if you got Fulkerson back, that's one of those things that plays into Tennessee's favor. But you just keep coming back to guard play. That's what we talk about in March, and that's, if you're looking at Tennessee, I don't care about the red flags. That's a red flag on Tennessee's situation, is I'm really concerned about their guard play and ball handling. All right, when we come back, what seed do we think Tennessee's going to get, and what is a realistic expectation for this team? That's a hard question to ask right now, not knowing about Fulkerson, not knowing the seed, not knowing the draw. But I'm still going to ask it. We'll come back and answer it next, and then we got some football on the Sports Source. Come on back.